Hello. Welcome to part 3, World War II, when really flying boats and seaplanes reach their zenith. They really do. So, I hope you're going to enjoy this. I certainly do. This is the time period when they really do, as I said, reach their zenith. I'm repeating zenith a lot. Bilge pumps. I have to say, there are many things I love about doing bilge pumps, but one of the things I love most about it is the memes on my Discord, link down below. The memes that people come up with based on what's it's just so cool. And I wish that some would actually do a 600 ship navy just for me and, you know, the bilge pump crew, because we'd love it. You'd have so much fun dissecting it. Anyway, so what were they for? Well, long-range ASW and maritime patrol. The Battle of the Atlantic and the Battle of the Pacific couldn't have been conducted without these aircraft. And communication. If you want to get anywhere, they're still building airfields. Those airfields aren't great. And if you think about traveling across the Atlantic to the UK, there are many more places you can make landfall and land on water than there are places you can have airfields. Makes the idea of trying to estimate where someone's coming in and arrange a meaningful ability to actually take them out of the air is very, very difficult, virtually verging on impossible. So, yeah, that isn't going to happen. It's fun, though, for many other people to dream, and some do really dream. Right. So we have the Short Seaford and the Supermarine Wars here, and they are both absolutely lovely. I do have great affection for both, especially the Short Seaford because it has 20mm cannons in its dorsal turret, but we'll get to that in a second. What I mostly want to talk about is the fact that it's a continuation on, in many respects, of the Sunderland. It is an upgraded Sunderland, but it's more than that. It's something which is... how do I put this? It's something which is quite special in that... can I find my notes? Sorry, someone rang me in the middle of recording this earlier. And I had to save a load of things and put a load of things away, and it happened. So, the Short Seaford, only about 10 of them are built. They served quite a while in the RAF, but they eventually, most of them get leased to the British Overseas Air Corporation because, honestly, the RAF is winding down in terms of its, especially its maritime patrol in the late 1940s because peace is here. So you don't need the facilities. But they have 6.5 Browning machine guns, 2 in the nose and tail turrets, and there are some beam guns as well. The 2 cannon on the dorsal, on the top, and 2 forward-firing .303 Browning machine guns. Not sure why she needed those, because, you know, nicest way. Carrying 4,960, well, near enough, this makes those different, 5,000 pounds worth of bombs. That's 2.25 tons worth of bombs and depth charges. Not sure there's really anyone who's going to stand up to you. Whilst does only have maximum speed of 242 miles an hour, she does have a range of 2,700 nautical miles, and she is powered by 4 Bristol Hercules radial engines, which each generate 1,720 brake horsepower, which by my calculations works out at giving her 6,880 brake horsepower overall. Think about that. 6,880 brake horsepower. That's a lot. It really is. Crew as usual 11. More interesting than that, though, is that whilst she does weigh at about 20.5 tons empty, fully laden, she's at that 34 tons. So she's taken up with her 13.5 tons worth of stuff. And I've only listed 2.25 tons of bombs, so what the other 11.25 tons is, who knows? I don't think 11 crew take up that much space. A lot of fuel. A lot of fuel. But they're cool. And it's also worth mentioning that not long after the war, the British, well, Sanders Roe Company, will put together a flying boat fighter aircraft called the SRA-1, which is powered by turbojet engines. Well, it's experimental and free art built, but it's quite cool. And it's for the same reason that they were building fighters float plane fighters pre-World War II. Because you have a lot more water than you do have airfields. And if you're in a scenario where you don't pre-helicopters, pre-Vistol aircraft, I'm talking more Harrier than F-35 here. I support the F-35. I love the F-35. But the Harrier was more of a rush trip aircraft than the F-35 will be. This was a good way of maximizing your deployability. Honestly surprised we haven't seen people more looking into it still to this day, because there's a lot more water around the world than there. And also, we have up here the Supermarine Walrus, which, as far as I understand it, is after the Spitfire, the next most produced supermarine aircraft of World War II. Here's the sneaking little thing. Supermarine were far more of a flying boat and a seaplane company during the interwar years than they were a fighter company. And this aircraft, the Walrus, was also designed by R.J. Mitchell. Also designed. It would serve with the Fleet Air Arm, the Royal Air Force, the Royal New Zealand Air Force, the Royal Australian Air Force, and the Royal New Zealand Navy when it was formed, including from Leander and Achilles, although I don't think it was aboard Achilles during the Battle of the River Plate. I think she had something else aboard her. But that's just my memory, so I could be wrong. And this is by far the other end of the dinkiness from the Seaford, because this aircraft weighs in at a little over 3.25 tons gross, less than 2.25 ton, a little under 2.25 tons empty. But she's really quite cool for two reasons. One, she's produced in 1933 and has a Bristol Pegasus engine. Now, what other aircraft has the Bristol Pegasus engine? It's a Swordfish. Anyone think someone was actually thinking around the Royal Navy going, or Fleet Air Arm and all this time thinking, logistics at sea, better have more aircraft using the same engine than aircraft using different engines, because then I can carry 20 of one type rather than 5 each of 4 types. And she has fully retractable undercarriage, which means eventually they get them operating off carriers. It's a bit fun at the beginning, but they do get there. Search and rescue, reconnaissance, carrier onboard delivery of key personnel, all these things. The little walrus does, and they are good. They are. You can also look up the Supermarine Seagull, the Supermarine Sea Otter. Apparently they go with 2 aircraft called Seagull. Honestly, Supermarine and naming things are not perhaps seriously. They lucked out with the Spitfire. Okay, they managed to do the Spitfire, great. The rest of the Supermarine naming is a bit hit and miss. Leans towards the missing side. It's just weird. Right then, now we have the consolidated PB2Y Coronado. Any resemblance to certain aircraft which I might have mentioned in the past? Bristol, maybe? Is entirely incidental. Curtiss SOC Seagull, and there's also the Seahawk, I think, which comes after that. They are basically much of a muchness in some respects. But the PB-2Y Coronado is supposed to be a flying boat patrol bomber, which the US built 217 of, and this is a less successful aircraft. It has a range of 930 nautical miles at 131 miles per hour, so rather less range than the PBY does, Catalina. And, you know, it's actually less powerful in terms of weaponry than the Seafood. It's kind of interesting because the Catalina's really up there in quality. Then this one comes through, and basically they're going, what are we building you for? Well, you're going to be able to carry 12,000 pounds of bombs. That's almost 5.5 tons of bombs housed in the wings, or 2 Mark 13 torpedoes. So that affects everything else. This is very much a bomber. The PBY very much a reconnaissance aircraft. This is very much your nightmare if you are planning on working out where your enemy was operating from because of where they had air bases. Now, the Seagull is a single-engined observation plane, so it's rather cute. It's also me going, you know what? Every time people talking to me, they go, well, the Royal Navy was really bad having a biplane going into World War II. Well, the biplane in question, the Swordfish, was built as a torpedo spotter reconnaissance, which could also act as a floatplane. The equivalent US spotter reconnaissance aircraft for operating from their cruisers is also a biplane and serves through the whole of World War II, and it's called the Seagull. And whilst the Seahawk comes along in 1944 and is a monoplane, the Seagull serves for a long time. So there you go. Those people who keep telling you that the only ones who had a biplane in World War II were the British, not only are forgetting a whole lot of Finnish involvement and some of the Russian aircraft, but they're forgetting a lot of other things as well. The Kawasaki HK8 and the Najima. Now, if the A6M2N is looking at all familiar to any of you, that's because someone had the amazing idea of turning a Zero into a float plane. I'm going to just point this out to the wonderful people who were in charge of Japanese aircraft development in World War II. Why? Okay, I get the logic. It allows you to base it forward at islands and all sorts of things and all this stuff without the infrastructure. But you have designed an aircraft whose entire raison d'etre is being light and fast. And then you turn into a float plane. Okay, there are good reasons to have float planes, but you have an aircraft which is designed to be light and fast, and then you turn it into a float plane. What are you doing? Do you just not like your pilots? Do you want them to die? Okay. Now that's over. The Kawasaki H8K. Now, the H8K is codenamed Emily, and we won't even get on to Ruth, which is its next door neighbor in that picture, which is what the Allies called the Zero converted to a why? Sorry, I'm going to stop saying why in a second. Basically, as soon as the Kawasaki H6K entered service in 1938, the IJN wanted a larger, longer-ranged aircraft. Basically, the moment the IJN get anything, they go, "We want it bigger." Their accountants must have been having a nightmare. In the good news, for the US Marine Corps, the fact is that an Emily managed to be shot down by a Brewster F-2A Buffalo. You know, when it was going after Hawaii. I don't know. The idea was actually to use them to, they actually planned to use H-8Ks to fly from French frigate shoals and attack Hawaii in a sort of second raid on 4th of March 1942, and it's just terrible. They just get no. The Japanese build roughly 167 of them, but they have several variants. And their characteristics. So, their maximum takeoff weight is 32,500 kilograms, or 32.5 tons. Their armament is 5 20mm, one in each in bow, dorsal, tail turrets, plus one each in two-way splitters, which you can see. And 5 7.7mm Type 92 machine guns in fuselage hatches. So this was designed as a flying, I don't know, fortress sort of thing. The idea being we have a big aircraft, so we have it festooned with machine gun holes. Gives you a chance, I suppose. Now, here's the interesting thing. The figure I can find when I was looking for it was the ferry range, which is 3,862 nautical miles. That's a long way. That is a long way. And apparently, they did have an air surface radar eventually fitted to them. Not sure how soon it was fitted, but they did have one fitted. And they're a cute thing. You know, they even used them for transport to try and refuel their islands and all sorts of things. So they were really used a lot. But they called it Emily. Yeah, I think the Allied reporting names for these things are specifically chosen to try and undermine them. And I'm sorry, I'm still distracted by what's coming next, so I'm going to get to Roof. Okay. Believe it or not, the Japanese built 330 almost of these. He really didn't like their pilots, did they? They just didn't like them. They take the worst version of the Zero. Out of that, the worst version of Zero, the weakest, and they use it. And they turn it into this. There were some advantages. They could put them on islands and places where they could have a chance of intercepting bomber squadrons. But the moment they came up against anything which was at all actually capable of its job as a fighter. They were gone. And now I've talked about them so long, been distracted so long, I have actually been talked over the Germans. So I will finish off with the stats of the A6M2N. Crew, 1. I'm sorry, man. I'm just sorry. They've got two 20mm machine guns, well, cannon, in outer wings, and two 7.7mm machine guns in the forward fuselage. They can carry two small bombs, 132-pound bombs, or 60 kilograms, so basically equivalent to the pathetic anti-submarine warfare bombs, which the Royal Navy was the Fleet Air Arm was floating around at the beginning of World War II. Can't get over those bombs either. Otherwise, it's pretty similar things to the Zero, other than, let's see, its maximum speed is 270 miles an hour or 235 knots. And its range is 620 nautical miles. I just don't know who came up with this idea. I really don't. They must have something against Japanese pilots. They must do. That's the only way you can examine it. Right then, on to the Germans. And there are many options of what I could pick for Germany in this one. But, because they like to experiment. But I went for the Behemoths. The BV-222 Viking and the Von Voss BV-238, which are both absolutely freaking colossal, even though there's only one 238 built. They are massive. They are truly colossal aircraft. And they show the other major advantage of this time of building a flying boat. The fact that you could land something this humongous. Let's see. When, for example, what they did in Norway, the V1s made seven flights between Hamburg and Kirkenes up to 19th August 1941, transporting a total of 65 tons of supplies and 221 wounded men. That's the thing. If you're going into Norway, there's a lot more water than there is land bases. At this time, though, when they were doing their Norway operations, they were unarmed, so they were escorted the whole time by Messerschmitt's Bf-110s. Seriously. Even some skewers might have stood a chance against that group. They were considered for flights to Japan and all sorts of things. Post-war, they were even used. They have the capacity to carry 92 troops or 72 wounded on stretchers. They had a maximum takeoff weight of 49 tons, but they had interesting enough, an empty weight of roughly 30 and a half tons, and a gross weight of possibly 46 tons. So it's quite interesting how they managed to move so much equipment. But their endurance is 28 hours, or a ferry range of 3,300 nautical miles. They're just colossal. And then you have the BV-238, which is even bigger. That's just pure, I don't know what, coming out. It's just massive. Maximum takeoff weight, 100 tons. 100 tons. That's almost as big as WWII wanted. Well, no, WWII thought they would be carrying 100 tons of bombs by this point. WWII is an interesting gentleman. But it could carry a huge amount of ordnance, the 238. When I say huge, its maximum range is 3,570 nautical miles, and its bombs it's able to carry are 20 250 kilogram bombs, 4,000 kilogram bombs. That's 4 1-ton bombs. Or this is on external racks, or two torpedoes, or 4 of the Henschel HS-2393 missiles, or 2,000 1-ton dive glide bombs. Oh my god. Seriously, this thing is immense. Thank God it only came into service in April 1944. Well, flight April 1944. And never got really out of the prototype stage. The more I read about this thing, the more I start thinking, oh my lord. Going over my own notes is frankly scaring me at the moment. Right. Let's go to something less scary. The German search and rescue. Now, this is one of the reasons why they have so many flying boats and so many seaplanes. They actually set these up through the channel so their pilots, if they crash through the channel, can recover to them, and then a seaplane can come and pick them up. That's the idea. Reality. They do work. They do get used. I think they're used in one movie. But I think a Lancaster crew is making use of them. But honestly, on a scale of, where I would like to end up in the middle of the ocean, that isn't it. I prefer to end up back on land. But they do have accommodations. They do have all sorts of food and games. I just hope it wasn't. I just hope the cards weren't set up for Snap. That would have been very boring, especially if you were solo. Right, next one. Italy. Well, I keep doing the Mackie, so I thought I'd do a Fiat one. And frankly, the Fiat is just lovely. Pretty much, this is about 100 and almost very close to 190. I think it's about 185, 86. Are produced. Their first flight is in May 1939, introduced in May 1941, and they retire in 1948. I think 49. They are really quite useful. They have a range listed of about. Give me a second. They have a range of about 1,350 nautical miles, which. Sorry, I was checking my own maths there. Which meant they were adequate for the Mediterranean. They were really quite good for the Mediterranean in that respect. And they're a pretty nice little aircraft. Again, these are reconnaissance aircraft. These are, to an extent, going to be involved in the bombing role occasionally, and they're going to be a lot involved in the communication roles and sort of moving people backwards and forwards across the Mediterranean. And they're good for all those. Although, again, I wouldn't like to have been in one if it had come up against a fighter or from one of the carriers. I don't think they'd have been that great. But they're cute. So we've got the flying boats and seaplanes today. We've got some more admirals, engineers, and historians. We've got naval diplomacy coming up. We've got all these things happening. Ooh, Patreon video on Monday the 20th of July. And as you can see, usually the rest of Thursdays and Tuesdays, we have Making Mare Nostrum a holiday. So the Italians are going to be a bit of a focus in August. A little bit of a focus on. Cool. Where else to find me? Twitter, Patreon, Global Maritime History, and of course YouTube. So thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening.
and I hope you enjoy Bilge Pump's. I think it's a Bilge Pump's episode 3 of the new stream, episode 6 overall. You know, it's fun times. The link's down below. Thank you. Take care.